After we have connectivity with our Catalyst switch, we might want to connect. Again, we could connect locally or we could connect remotely, but we want to connect and we can give some show commands to see information about the switch. We might want to see what is the version of Cisco IOS software running on the switch right now. We might want to take a look at the current configuration. We might want to take a look at the interface status. For example, do I have an interface that is administratively shut down? If so, it's not going to be passing traffic. I might need to bring that up. We could take a look at our MAC address table to see what MAC addresses have been learned off of what ports. We could take a look at lots of other things. As one other example, we could check out the port security. Do I have any ports that have been disabled, maybe because there's been some sort of a security violation? Somebody tried to put too many devices off of one of the ports, and maybe that caused the port to go into an error disable state. Let's take a look at some common show commands that will allow us to glean information from our Cisco Catalyst switch. Let's say that we connect to our switch and we want to get some information about this switch. Maybe it's a customer switch, we're doing consulting, or maybe it's a switch that we just purchased and we just booted up. If we want to see information such as what version of Cisco IOS the switch is running, what interfaces are installed, we can give the command show version, or we could give the shortcut of show ver. But let's take a look at the output. What kind of information can we glean from this? One of the most important things is the Cisco IOS version. It looks like here we're running version 12.244 SE1. And if you're reporting an issue to Cisco's TAC, the Technical Assistance Center, they would want to know information such as what Cisco IOS version are you running. Something else that's valuable to know is how long has the switch been powered on. The switch uptime is 14 minutes in this case. We scroll down a bit further, and by the way, we scroll down by pressing the space bar to get another screen full of output. And on this screen, we see the interfaces that we have in this switch. I've got one virtual Ethernet interface configured. That means the VLAN 1 interface, that's where we assign the management IP address. That's what it's referring to. And I've got 24 fast Ethernet interfaces and a couple of gigabit interfaces. We can also see how much memory the switch has, how much RAM. And this is important when we're about to do an upgrade of Cisco IOS, because one of the things that we're told as we're about to download that upgrade image is, here's how much RAM you need, and we need to make sure that we have enough. And in order to interpret how much we have, we need to add these two numbers together. Let's pull out our calculator and let's say 118784 plus 12280. And in order to convert 131,064K kilobytes into megabytes, we divide by 1024. We have 1024K in a meg. Let's say divided by 1024, and we get 127.99. We've got 128 meg of RAM is what this is telling us. 128 meg, and this again is valuable information to know as you're about to upgrade your Cisco IOS image. We can see information such as the model number of the switch. I'm running a Catalyst 3750, but there are several models of 3750 Cisco Catalyst switches. We get to see what specific model number I have. If we scroll down, we get a bit of summary information. Here again is the Cisco IOS software version. Here is our specific model. And as you can see, there's lots of other information contained in that show version output, but we've tried to highlight some of the most valuable information we get from that command. Let's now talk about port security on our Cisco Catalyst switch. And before we take a look at the verification commands for port security, let's talk about setting it up. The purpose of port security is to make sure that we don't have too many MAC addresses, or we don't have disallowed MAC addresses attached off of a specific Ethernet port. In order to set this up, and let's set this up on an unused interface, let's go into Interface Fast Ethernet 1/0/10. In order to set this up, we need to be running in access mode. In other words, if it could dynamically become a trunk, if the far end device to which it was attached suggested that it become a trunk, then it would be running in dynamic mode. In order for port security to work, we've got to be in a statically configured access mode. To do that, we say switch port mode, and we've got options here. We've got access, meaning that we're just an access port. We belong to one VLAN. Dynamic means that we could form a trunk if we wanted to. We're willing to form a trunk. And the trunk mode says that we are a trunk. Let's say switch port mode access. Now we can turn on port security. We do that with the command switch port security. That enables port security on this interface. We can specify the maximum number of MAC addresses that can be attached to this interface, how many MAC addresses are allowed. This reminds me of this building where I was doing some work once, and the manager of this office building, they rented out different offices to different tenants. Lots of different businesses all resided in this same building, and as part of their lease, they could add on a specific number of network connections. And I remember one business within that building, and they had a small sales office. They had maybe 3 salespeople in an office, but they all needed Ethernet connections. And to abide by the building guidelines, they should have paid for 3 separate Ethernet connections. However, to avoid that cost, what they wanted to do was to install a hub or a switch where they could have multiple devices using that single connection that was in their office. And then at the end of the day, no joke, they would disconnect the hub or the switch or whatever they had, and they would hide it. They would hide it so if anybody from the management of the building came in, they wouldn't see what they were trying to do. We could prevent that type of thing with port security. With port security, the building management could have said, there is only one MAC address that can be learnable off of this switch port that feeds into that office. Here's how we can specify the maximum number of MAC addresses that can be learned off of a single switch port. We can say switch port security maximum, and we can give a number as low as 1 or as high as 6,144 on this switch. I want to say that the maximum is 2. Now that we've said we will only learn a maximum of 2 MAC addresses off of this specific port, the question now comes up, do we want these MAC addresses to just be any MAC addresses? Whichever 2 MAC addresses are learned first, they're the ones that are allowed? Or do we want to have control over that? Do we want to say that we want this specific MAC address to be permitted and we want this other specific MAC address to be permitted? If we want to specify specific MAC addresses, we can do that. Here's how we do it. We would say switch port security MAC address, and we could enter a 48-bit MAC address. And since I'm allowing 2 MAC addresses, we could enter this command twice, and those would be the 2 allowed MAC addresses off of this switch port. As you can see, this solution doesn't scale terribly well. If we had to manage many Ethernet ports in a large enterprise, it would be tedious to have to enter each individual MAC address on each port. What we could do instead is use what is called sticky learning. Sticky learning says that we're dynamically going to learn the MAC addresses. We'll learn the first 2 MAC addresses that we see off of a particular port, and they will be the 2 permitted MAC addresses. To set that up, we say switch port security MAC address sticky. Sticky learning is now enabled, and the first 2 MAC addresses to be seen off of that port can be entered into our security table, and they would be the allowed MAC addresses. By the way, this sticky learning is going to make those MAC addresses live in the running configuration. However, if we were to reboot the switch before saving the configuration, those MAC addresses, those sticky learned MAC addresses, they would be lost. So if we want to learn the MAC addresses using sticky learning and have those be the permanent MAC addresses that we're going to be saying have access via this port, we need to save our configuration after they're learned. Something to keep in mind. But however the switch learns about these MAC addresses, another consideration is, what do we do if a violation occurs? Let's take a look at our options. Let's say switch port security violation, and we have 3 options: protect, restrict, and shutdown. So let's pretend that we're allowing 2 MAC addresses off of this port, and a 3rd MAC address is suddenly seen on this port. If we say protect, that's going to drop that frame from that 3rd MAC address, the MAC address that exceeded our limit. That's what the protect option does. If we say restrict, it is also going to drop traffic from that unpermitted MAC address, the one that exceeded our maximum threshold. But restrict does something in addition to that. The difference between restrict and protect is that restrict will also increment our security violation counter. And I'll show you how we see that counter in just a few moments. Finally, and this is quite harsh, is shutdown. If there is a violation off of a port, instead of allowing, in our case, the 2 MAC addresses to continue to use that port, we will shut that port down. Specifically, it goes into an error disable state. And the way you recover from an error disable state is you resolve what caused it. You disconnect that 3rd MAC address as an example, and then you shut down the interface, and then you bring it back up again. So let's say that that's what we want to do. Shut down. To recover from the error disable state, I said we could shut down the interface and then bring it back up. Here's how we do that. Notice I'm in interface configuration mode, and I can say shut down, and then I can do a no shutdown, or just no shut for short. Remember, we can use shortcuts. That's how we could help a port recover if it did get into an error disable state. Now that we've got port security configured, let's see how we verify it. What show commands can help us out? First, there's a basic command. We can say simply show port security, and it tells us that port security is enabled on just one port, the one we just configured. The maximum MAC address count, we configured that to be 2. I haven't learned any MAC addresses right now, so the current count is 0. And remember that the restrict option was going to increment our security violation counter. Here is that counter. And the security action that we're configured for right now is shutdown. And shutdown was going to place that interface into an error disable state. Oh, and one other thing that it would do, it would also send an SNMP trap, a simple network management protocol message, going back to a management server if we're configured for SNMP. And we also see how many secure MAC addresses that we can support on the system, 6,144. If we want to see what addresses have been permitted via port security, we don't have any right now, but if we did, we could say show port-security address. And if we did have MAC addresses that were sticky learned or statically configured, they would show up here under the MAC address column. If we want to see how a specific interface is configured for port security, we could do that. We could say, and by the way, to make this a little quicker, I'm going to press the up arrow. That was the keyboard shortcut to look at my previous command in command history. Show port security address. I'm going to backspace over address, and then I'm going to say interface fast Ethernet 1/0/10. And we can see for this port, we have indeed enabled port security. Right now, there's nothing connected to the port, and it's in the down state. If there's a violation that occurs, we're going to go into an error disable state. We also see the maximum MAC addresses permitted on this interface. That's set to a 2, and we haven't seen any security violations yet. And that's an overview of how we can configure port security and then verify port security on our Cisco Catalyst switch.